Hello. All right, we're going to take a few seconds and then start. Okay. Great. Welcome to the 12th episode of ACK and Friends, where we bring to you the best of Indian kids literature. Amar Chitra Katha has been telling stories from India to children for about 53 years now. And India has always had a lot of great literature to offer. And a big part of that are the stories that have been written solely for children. Today, there are a lot of wonderful authors who are writing joyful and important stories, and we hope to give you a sneak peek into this delightful world of Indian kids literature. Today, we are joined with Olivier Lafont. He's an acclaimed author, screenplay writer, actor with a very impressive body of work. And his body of work appeals to all ages. You might also remember him from his big screen outings in movies like Three Idiots and Guzaarish. Originally from France, he grew up in India and loves the country, something that shines through his work. He's here with us to talk about his latest book, Oop and Lila, Lost at the Scarabean Sea. Please join me in welcoming him. Hello, welcome to ACK and Friends.
Hello, hi. Thanks for inviting me to come and talk to you and to come and talk to some of the
We are
readers who are
very
out there.
excited. We are very excited to have you here. And like I mentioned, you've done a varied amount of writing. You've written for films, you've written for adults, and of course for kids. And what comes most naturally to you?
Oh, that's a tricky question. Everything comes naturally to me, if you will, because all of these are stories in my mind, you know. So
Yeah.
there's a very seamless connection between all of them, between fiction writing for kids and fiction writing for adults. There's really, there's just trying to be aware of, the different rules for children and for adults. But even that transition into film is very seamless. Like when I write, for example, when I write, I'm acting out the story in my mind. And when I'm acting, I've got a whole writing aspect that's going on in the background while I'm acting. So the two are really seamlessly integrated. And you'll find, I think, at least in the writing, maybe the readers might have the same impression, that Upan Leela, I wrote it very cinematically, as well as
Yes, that is, yeah.
literature. So, and
Yeah,
that's something
absolutely.
that's
That is
consistent in my book.
evident because it is very visually
Mm,
rich and
mm,
wonderful, the book. So that is evident that you think very visually because all the
mm,
characters have their own little things happening, very distinct characteristics. So
mm,
yeah, that is evident. So if all of it comes naturally to you, what do
mm.
you enjoy doing the most?
Oh man, the thing is, they're also very different technically and structurally. So each has their own different joy. For
Hmm.
example, when you write fiction, you can really get into and show and have the reader understand and go through the mental processes. You see, so that is very fun because you can get into the minds of your characters, and then depending on how you position them and everything, you can have the reader understand and feel what the character is feeling. You just
Yeah.
can't do that in film. In film, the best you can do is suggest visually how the people on film are thinking and feeling. You know,
Yeah.
you don't know what's going on in their heads. Hopefully, the actors and directors have portrayed it in a way that it's very clear what's going on.
Hmm.
But those are two. So they're very different joys because getting that exact reaction in a film that you were trying to get is really the pinnacle of filmmaking.
Yeah.
And whereas in fiction you can really explain it and what you can say, this is what this person is feeling and thinking, and this is what they're going to do. So the joys of the two creative processes are both great. I couldn't pick one. Sorry.
All right. Okay. That's all right. So a lot of the books that you've written, especially for kids, have an element of fantasy in them.
Mhm.
And why do you think it? Why do you think fantasy is important? In what way is it important?
Uh, Fantasy is important. I mean, I'll speak personally. Fantasy was very important to me as a kid, um, because of what fantasy does is it integrates wonder with fun, and with discovery and adventure. All these things are happening at the same time. So I think, especially for kids, it's important to really expand the imagination. That's one aspect of being a kid. That's just really great. It's a fantastic thing to have. I know I really had it when I was a kid. It's something I totally enjoyed, and it gave me a whole internal dimension to my life that was a counterpoint to what your real life is, what you experience in your real life. So
Yeah.
it's a really wonderful, rich inner culture that, if you can develop it, is really a constant source of joy and expansion as a human being. At
Yeah.
least it was for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think fantasy is very important for to have that bit in a kid's life.
Mm.
So the book that we are going to talk about, uses fantasy tropes like quests and seeking a magical item. And so, why do you think tropes in general have stuck and endured for fantasy, fantasy genre especially?
Well,
What works?
sorry.
I was like, what works? What in that works?
Okay, well, what in that works is the thing with the quest, the heroic quest, and I think it's a technical structural question you're asking me, so I'll address it on that level. The quest works because the quest in fiction and in film works because it is um, a reflection of how people see their lives, or should, or
Hmm.
want to. You see, everyone sees their life as a quest, and what a quest really is you've got a progression from where you are. You're trying to achieve something, and it's the entire adventure from here to that point. So people see their lives as a quest. A quest. I mean, when you're a kid, I don't think you have quite the same quest things that an adult would have over the span of 10 years. My quest is to
Yeah.
build this company into something big, and I've got 10 years to do it. Kids have a more, what's my quest? I'm going to go and I'm going to go and conquer this video game, for example. you know
Yeah.
I'm going to go and play, go karting, and my quest is to win, something like that. Even in sports, the quest is really, it's a reflection of your life story at this moment, and it has to have that kind of lovely winning ending, and that expanding thing, and that growth thing. So the quest really is absolutely an integral part of fantasy writing, as a reflection of each person's individual story. You want to see things mirrored in the stories that you read and that you watch, and that are part of the culture that you evolve in.
Yeah. Okay. Going a little bit back to your childhood, in a recent interview, you mentioned that
Hmm.
how when you moved to India from France as a 7-year-old,
Uh-huh.
everything felt alien, and
Hmm.
Amar Chitra Katha sort of was a saving grace. So, what is your first memory of Amar Chitra Katha?
Oh, wow. Okay. I have to contextualize it slightly. Um,
Mm.
Basically, I was 7 years old. I mean, I grew up in France, and my family moved to Delhi, um, and I didn't speak any English or Hindi. And I was put into an
Mm.
English medium school, and I went straight into an ESL, English as a second language class. Um, and I felt very, the move also to a culture that is so different from France. There was this language barrier, if you will, that I had to overcome. And we moved, and we were living in the French embassy for the first 2 months that we were there, and then we ended up, in New Friends Colony in Delhi, if that's a reference for anyone. And while we were at the French embassy, there were, amongst the literature that was there for people at the guest house to read, there were a couple of Amar Chitra Katha comics. And
Oh.
me not knowing any English, just picking up those comics. Now in France, we have a huge comics culture. It's called bande dessinée, and it encompasses comics and graphic novels. So I was very familiar with, for me, I grew up on bande dessinée. So when I saw comics, there was an immediate like, oh man, this is something that I know, that I can access, and it was in English. So there was that whole language challenge. I'm learning English. I'm putting together words. And most of all, it was an into Indian culture that I didn't have easily. You see, the as a French kid coming to India, I had the language barrier. I didn't really have reference points for what is all this culturally. How are people? The body language and everything was just different. It felt alien. But the Amar Chitra Katha comics really allowed me an in into how people lived and how people connected to their culture and what all this meant. For example, Holi didn't mean
Mm.
anything to me. Diwali meant nothing to me. But when I read about it and put it together with Amar Chitra Katha, then it all began to make sense. So it was a saving grace because it was how I connected with Indian culture and learned Indian culture and then grew into someone who, I got over my language and cultural, obstacles, so to speak, with really such lovely stories, and the illustrations were just so evocative, you know, evocative, and
Yeah.
how the story was structured. It was just really, it was such a treat. It was such a
Okay.
treat, and I'm just so glad it was that really brought me into Indian culture.
All right, great. Um, okay, so now moving on to the book we are here to discuss, and
Mhm.
let me tell everybody who's watching a little bit about the book. So, this book, Upan Lila, Lost at the Scarabean Sea, the book follows siblings Upan Lila as they magically are transported into this rollicking adventure. With pirates and sea scarabs and wish fulfilling candy, and it's just something that you will love reading. It's just one page after the other of great fun, and it's been published by Hachette and beautifully illustrated by Krishna Balashinoy. And so yeah, that's the book. My first question, like I mentioned before, was that it is very visually rich. The story is
Mhm.
beautifully rich, and each character has very specific characteristics that invoke an image into your mind instantly. So,
Mhm.
when you're starting out a story, do you visually map out stuff? Like, did you draw out like a rough map of where they would go next, and like sit over it and plot where you would send them? How did the process begin?
Oh man, you know, anyone who's really into fantasy has to be into maps. I mean,
Yes.
all the stuff I've ever written, I've had maps. I've drawn maps for books that I haven't written yet. I mean, earlier when I was a kid. So those are, but yes, yeah, you have to have a map in a fantasy book. When you have a quest that also has a geographic dimension, you need a map. That is,
Yeah.
that's an absolute thing. And then in terms of other visual aids, yes, there were. I had drawn all the main characters. I had drawn Upan Leela. I had drawn the antagonist, let's say, and I had
Okay.
drawn Captain Angry, who's the pirate captain they go along with. Yeah, and I think there were a couple others that I had drawn. So yes, I certainly had this visual thing, because I mean that's just one, is it's how I think. So there's that whole visual dimension is in my head. But to put it down, and for a children's book, there is that illustrative quality that
Yeah.
that that children's books kind of have to have. And I grew up with, for example, Enid Blyton. And Enid
Yes.
Blyton without illustrations just isn't really Enid Blyton. Enid Blyton, Beatrix Potter. Oh, you have to have those
Yeah.
illustrations. Alice in Wonderland with the original
Yeah.
illustrations. Even all those Russian folk stories that
Yes.
that 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 I know. I didn't have access to in France. I didn't really know them. In India, they were more available. And just seeing the illustrations of Baba Yaga and all that, oh, you have to have that
Yeah.
illustrative component to fantasy and to children's books.
Okay. All right. So tell us, when plotting this book out, what came
Mhm.
first? Did the pirates come first, or did the alternate universes come first?
It was the alternate universes. You see,
Okay.
I the in terms of my the question kind of leads a little bit into my process. I have a list of ideas that I'm continuously adding to, and I've had it for years. And what happens in my list of ideas, I jot down anything. It could be the story. It could be a line of dialogue, it could be a character, it could just be a title, it could be anything. And from that list of ideas, they just kind of percolate. And over time, some of them just float up to the surface and stay with me and sort of persist in my mind. And that's when I know that there's something here that I really want to put together and write, either
Okay.
into a film or into a book. So the elements that were there was the the globes, the snow globes, and each so basically a bunch of snow globes, and each snow globe is one scene, and each story goes into that snow globe. You see,
Yeah.
the second element was the wish candy. That was something that was quite cool. You have 99 wish candy, and with each
Yeah.
one you can wish. So it's not even like the genie's three wishes, where it's like, oh, you have to parse it out very carefully and be very specific about how you wish. This is like, man, there's 99 of them. I'll gobble them all up.
Yeah.
There's so many. You see, so
Yeah.
so that sense of plenty was also quite a fun thing. So these two elements were there: the snow globes and the wish candy. And what I'd wanted to do for a while was to explore this brother sister dynamic, a sibling dynamic, but it
Okay.
really took form
Hmm.
of a brother and a sister pairing. That was something that really intrigued me to look at and go into in more detail. Um, so these elements were there, and then once they kind of came together, is when I was like, okay, I want a setting, and the setting that immediately suggested itself was the pirate world,
Okay.
and that was
Yeah.
fun and accessible. I mean, everyone knows the pirate world,
Yeah.
and then once I settled on that, then it was really, what is my spin I'm gonna give to the pirate world? So
Yeah.
that was kind of how it evolved.
Okay. So, one last question before I would like to ask you to read a little bit from the book is that
Sure.
what kind of research went into writing the book? Because
Mhm,
a lot of the characters and the places have historical references, and
mhm.
like the British forces or the British forces, and so so what
Mhm.
kind of research went into writing this?
There was a fair amount of research for all the what is factual information, right?
Huh.
Um, it's nowhere near as much as what my first book, Warrior, which was more of an adult fantasy book. There was a lot more research because it was based in our real world. You see,
Mm.
um, even my last book, Rise of the Midnight King, was based in our real modern world today, but it was based in Kumaon, so there was some research there. Upanila, there was a similar amount of research based on how much of it was the fact. So, for example, the geography of Upanlila, which takes the Arabian Sea and sort of twists it slightly. There was, so that whole geographic, what are the kingdoms and the regions around that whole, what is Madagascar and what is Asia and what is India in that world. And then there was all the pirates. That was fun uh, because I think, especially me having been, having grown up in Europe, I was more familiar with the whole Caribbean pirate history, you know,
Mm.
and I didn't know that much about Asian pirates. Researching that was just a ton of fun, to
Okay.
discover Kanuji Angre,
Yeah.
Angre, who I dub as Captain Angry in the book,
Angry. Correct.
who was, this Maratha admirer, and he wasn't a pirate. He was
Right.
called a pirate by the Europeans. He was no
Correct.
pirate. He was the admiral of the Maratha navy, and he was undefeated in the end of his. He went up against all the European navies, and he beat them all. And then you have the Chinese pirates. You have the great pirate queen, who was, she had a fleet of like hundreds of ships. She was also undefeated. She
Mm.
you know she retired from her career as a pirate, which is unheard of. Pirates don't retire. Pirates don't. That's just not how the job goes. So
Yeah.
discovering these real life pirates that I didn't know of from our history, and being able to integrate them into my book and present them in this fun fantasy kind of adventure, but to also have this historical layer, that was just a lot of fun. That was really something that I set out to do very dedicatedly. There's a glossary at the end of the book,
Yeah.
which then you can correlate the place names, the
Yeah.
characters, and with which specific pirate. So then If any
Correct.
reader is interested, they can go and find out, what real life pirate was this.
Okay. All right. So, if you would please read a little bit from the book, we have a
Hmm.
bunch of questions coming in, which we'll take a few of them right after that. So,
Sure.
yeah.
All right. Well, here we go. Captain Angry said, "But we still are, at the end of the day, pirates and live by the Pirate Codex. And the Pirate Codex prohibits children aboard as passengers or as labor." He gripped his beard with some distress. "And so we are bound to deliver you to the nearest port, even though you have no home in this world." The pirate's humor dipped visibly at his words, and the crew reluctantly nodded and muttered that it was so. "But what if we joined the crew?" Leela suggested innocently. There was a silence. The sea continued its susurrus. The ship's wooden joints groaned, and somewhere a seagull made a plaintive cry. "Yes," Oop added, electrified by the idea. "Yes, we can join the crew, become pirates. We have skills. Our magic. We can be pirates, pirate wizards." "Pirate wizard and pirate enchantress," Leela reminded him. "Yes, does the pirate codex forbid that?" The crew looked at each other in confusion. "Children? As pirates?" they mumbled back and forth. Captain Angry looked thunderstruck by the proposal. "Does the pirate codex forbid children on the crew?" he repeated. "In faith, it does not. It only says we cannot exploit them. But if you were to sign the contract..." And then something struck the savage, shifting the entire sloop of war sideways, toppling everyone over. Screaming and shouting, the crew spilled about, stunned. "What the flursting mildro!" the captain howled, dragging himself upright by the mainmast. "Crow!" he shouted. Up above their heads, a lookout dangled wildly from the mainmast, from which he had been knocked off. "Nothing in sight, sir. It could only be..." "Scarabs!" the captain cried. Scarabs. The whisper ran through the petrified crew. "What scarabs?" Oop asked as Mehua pulled him and Leela up. "Masters of the sea," Mehua told them, her expression stricken. "Poor ducklings. Our fate is sealed." "Arm the cannons!" the captain bellowed, shoving his men to their positions. "To your posts, men, for your lives!" "It's no use," the plum blossom widow said, kneeling to clutch the children to her. "Brave man." "What are scarabs?" Leela demanded, her voice warbling with anxiety. The boat suddenly dipped dangerously, the ocean swelling and making it dance about. Pirates scattered here and there, screaming with terror. "There," Mehua said with stoic calm, "our end." Oop and Leela turned to see the surface of the sea break. From the water began to rise, and continued to rise, something monstrous and enormous, a volume of black so large that it threw the boat in shadow, long before it finished rearing its head. An insect it was, but of such mammoth proportion neither of the children had ever seen. A sea scarab with wing fins that shone and glittered magnificent shades of metallic blue and green. If the sloop was 30 meters long, the scarab was 2 or 3 times its size, dwarfing the boat. "Oop!" Leela shrieked, grabbing his arm in an unbreakable grip. Oop was frozen, white-faced, unable to process the sheer size of the creature. "Below deck!" The captain was with them now, hauling Mehua to her feet. "Get them below!" She obeyed instantly, but with an expression that betrayed that she knew there was no saving any of them. Leela went quietly, struck dumb with fear. But Oop pulled his hand free from the plum blossom widows and moved to the side of the wildly swaying boat, as if in a trance. His hand went into his pocket even as he saw the scarab right itself, gaining its balance as it loomed over them, tall as any building in Mumbai. Its eyes were massive, an array of black orbs that multiplied its angles of vision. Its horrendous black mandibles spread open to let loose a bellowing sequence of clicks that deafened them all. Oop popped a wish candy into his mouth and whispered, "I wish to be master of the sea scarabs." The candy tasted of many different types of melon, refreshingly sweet, and then veered to wild mint after 2 bites. The sharpness of the mint bloomed, buzzed on his tongue, a buzzing that suddenly shot out through his skull like a miniature cyclone passing through all his brain cells in a moment before disappearing. Instantly, Oop knew the creature's mind, knew its alien ways and thoughts of the deep, fathomed its sweeping emotions and unassailable spirit. It was angry and sad, like all of its kind. And in its anger and sadness, it destroyed all the boats of these terrestrial invaders. It was an act of revenge, Oop realized, of desperate revenge for an unforgivable crime. With a grimace, Oop pulled himself back from the scarab's thoughts, lest he be swept into them for too long. He had to save them now, while there was still a chance. But how? There was only one thing he could think of. Stop! Oop cried, shouting as loud as his small voice could, putting out one hand towards the scarab. The scarab stopped. That's
Okay,
it.
great. Uh, Great, thank you so much for that. That was great.
Okay.
And I have one quick question before we go in, because there's a whole lot of questions coming in. Is that if you had wish fulfilling candy, what would it taste like, and what would you wish for? You
Oh
yourself.
man, I'm a straight up chocolate guy, so it would
Okay.
have to be chocolate. But because it's a wish candy, you've got to have something else going along with it. You got to have a a either a succession of different flavors that are supposed to startle you because it's doing things to your brain. So you
Hmm.
start with chocolate, but what would you toss in? Probably some fruit, some really exotic fruit, and maybe
Okay.
flowers. Because
Oh wow.
flowers, you have that flower smell, but
Yeah.
uh, flowers also have a taste. Some flowers, don't just go grabbing any flowers and eating them. But some flowers, I remember when I was a kid in France, there were these tiny purple flowers that when you plucked the petals, they were juicy petals, and when you sucked
Yeah.
on them, they were sweet. They were just tasted of sugar. So yeah,
Yeah.
chocolate fruit, which then becomes some flower kind of flavor. Yes, that would be it. And
All
what would
right.
I wish
Great.
for? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
What would you wish for? Go
What
ahead.
would
Tell me,
I
what would you wish for?
what would I wish for? No, no. Evil thoughts come to mind. No, what would I wish for? Hmm. Probably more time to write. Yeah, more time to write.
Okay.
I have so many stories. There's so many things I want to do, and I just find a day too short to do all the story writing that I want to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be it right now.
More time. All
Hmm.
right, great. So now I'm going to go in and let's see if we can answer as many as possible. We have
Absolutely.
um, we have a question from Sanjia Michael. Okay, Aparna Kapoor says, "What's your favorite made-up curse word in the book?"
Oh, from the book.
Oh,
Hi,
yes.
Aparna. Good question. Oh wow, my God, there's so many of them. I don't remember them all. My favorite ones are the made up ones. You see, because Captain Angry, he uses these curse words. For those people who don't know, he curses in he's a pirate, so that comes naturally, but it's gibberish for us. These are
Yeah.
expressions of that world. So really, you just you put together any sorts of sound. Those are my favorite. Then you've got Lila, then takes it and she starts doing her own spin on Captain Angry's curses, which is another story entirely. But yeah, which of Captain Angry's curses, man, I don't remember specifically because they're all just a different collection of garbage sounds, to our ears. So it's like Capstan the Mardamork, it makes sense to him and his crew or
Yeah,
not.
it does.
They just sort of go, what's he saying? Let's just do something here and steer the ship in that direction. I think that's what he means. Maybe even he doesn't know what he's saying, but yeah, it's a pretty eloquent curse. So yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, you just make
Okay.
up something and that's your favorite curse.
All right, great. We have Niranjana
Hi,
who
Anna.
asks, like Upen Leela suggests some wizard enchantress, what role would you like to play if you were part of the pirate crew?
If I were part of a real pirate crew, I'd
Yeah.
I'd take the captains. Really, only because look. Let me tell you straight. Being a pirate was not what most people think it is. It was actually the pirate crews ran in a very democratic manner. The
Okay.
captain was elected from them as the person with the most vision and everything. So no one was really pressured into this. In fact, a lot of pirates were escaping pretty bad lives to join a pirate crew. This is in real life. in our history. You see, but still, that said, being the captain is the best. You get the best financial deal from, because these were financial contracts that they established amongst themselves. You see,
Yeah.
you get the best food, you get all the grog, you make all the decisions, you tell people we'll head in that direction, and so that's the fun. I choose to be the captain. In the book, yeah, I'd still choose to be the captain. I think that's
Okay.
where it's at, really, being the boss on the ship. Yes,
Okay. So Neil asks
I know.
a bit of a chicken and egg question, but were you inspired by the to write the fantasy, or did you fill in the blanks in the fantasy with the historical references?
Uh, I filled in the blanks in the fantasy with historical references. Yeah, I had the story first, and then I came up with the piracy setting, and from there I did
Okay,
the research, and then created that whole setting.
great. All right. Our
Uh-huh.
next question is Priyanka
Hi,
asks,
Priyanka.
uh, what are your other favorite pirate themed books?
I mean, I have to go back to the classic, uh, Treasure Island. That was that's an enduring classic. It's a children's book, although it feels far more adult just because it's classic literature. I mean, Long John Silver was just that pirate reference and that name, Long John Silver.
Yeah.
So yeah, it would have to be Treasure Island that way. Beyond that, a lot of my pirate references and influences are really audiovisual. There was a
Okay.
Japanese anime that came out that was playing in France when I was a kid. That had a whole space. There were two of them that had a whole space pirate thing. So it was out in space, but these guys, it was a pirate ship, and the captain had an eye patch and a cool sword, and I mean that was fantastic. So yeah, so I have varied pirating influences, if you will.
Okay. Great. Okay, so Komal asks,
Like
how
Kamal.
much of the actor in you influences the writer in you in terms of characters, plots, or maps?
Uh, how much of the actor? Well, it won't affect so much the maps. It certainly affects the characters. It affects the plots. Yeah, to a great extent, because plot and character really evolve together in the same direction.
Yeah.
So a lot of it, because I think like I said earlier, when I write, I'm really enacting the story and the characters in my mind a lot. You know, so
Yeah.
I'll I may even say dialogues out loud to see how they sound and to really get into the thing. So yeah, so in terms of the characters, yes, a lot of the characterization, what do they look like, how do they speak, how do they think, how do they express themselves, what expressions they use, like Lila when she takes on the pirate curse words, man, that tells you something about who she is and how she thinks
Yeah.
and how she feels about pirates. So all of this is also it's something that I use in my acting career. When
Mm.
you create a character from a script, from the page, you really sort of look for all these wonderful nuances that make the written character a real person,
Yeah.
to whatever extent is required in the film, of course.
Mm.
I mean, but there's still that amount of detailing does go into to the acting thing, as it does into the writing for me.
Okay. Great. Okay, so Ashutosh Tiwari says, how do you get ideas for your story and how do you develop them further?
Hi, Ashutosh. How do I get ideas and how do I develop them further? Um, in the initial stage, like I mentioned earlier, I have a list of ideas. So it's really anything and everything that comes to me. I there are instances when I have a dream at night, that I wake up in the night and I jot down the idea, because I know come the next morning, I might have forgotten it, or even the particular quality. I might wake up the next morning and be like, oh man, I remember the dream, but I don't remember what was so nice about it, what was so fun or interesting. So I make sure to write it down on the spot. Any idea, line of dialogue, a plot point, a character, a funny situation, anything, it just goes into my list, you see. And so the ideas really come from uh, it's important to really nourish yourself as an artist, as an actor, as a writer, as anything. You have to nourish yourself with art. So I read a lot. I watch movies. I watch animation. Uh, and it's other things as well because I have a historical interest. I go to museums. I read about historical events. I'm interested in science, so you'll see, especially in Warrior, which was published by Penguin. I wrote about metallurgy and physics. All of these things nourish me as an artist. So you have to have all of that art flowing into you, and then you need to be the refracting lens, so that the art that comes out of you um, is an expression of you, but as nourished by the art that comes into you. And there you just follow your interest. Don't just read something because someone tells you to read it. It has to mean something to you. It has to be fun for you. It has to connect with you. So that's kind of, I hope I'm answering that to your satisfaction. How do I develop them? Then is a different deal. When I know I've got an idea, and I'll address it only for book, because developing it for film is a very different process. For a book, it's really, a lot of it happens very organically for me, in that the idea already kind of has a shape and a direction. So for Oop and Leela, I had the three main elements: the snow globes, the wish candy, and the brother sister thing. And it actually really kind of shot off. I maybe in that respect, I'm a very organic writer. I like to write and sort of half discover the story as I go along. I know the general direction I'm going in usually. Um, uh, I'm saying usually because in script writing, for example, you need to know exactly where you're going and exactly how you get there. So it's far more structural. In book writing, I like to give that openness to it. I enjoy the writing process. I stop to do research as I go along. Um, there have been occasions when I've had to stop and really structure the book. When I get far along, probably about a third of the way through the book, I know enough to be able to set down uh, the rest of the book structurally. Otherwise there's a risk of it kind of going off in a different direction. So yeah, that's how it happens. It
Okay.
kind of develops like that. I hope I've answered that properly for you.
Mm, yeah. Okay. Okay. So, do you like reading more or do you like writing more? Ame asks.
I like writing more.
Yeah.
I like
Okay.
writing. I love reading. I've loved it since I was a kid. But writing is really what really gets me.
Okay.
That for me, that's unparalleled. Yeah.
Okay. A couple of more we probably can.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So, when did you realize that you
Hi,
wanted to be a
Sanjay.
writer?
I was very young when I realized I wanted to be a writer. Um, I was around 9 years old, and
Okay.
I'd like I said, I moved to India. I didn't know. I knew zero English. Because of the way then that I took on that challenge of learning English with Amar Chitra Katha, and then a lot of other books. I read a lot, and I think I already had an interest in stories as such. And that reading, I remember the series that really turned it was by Lloyd Alexander. It was the Chronicles of Prydain, and that series was really, I read that, and it just did something to me, and I came out of that saying, I want to write. I'm going to write. So yeah, at about age 9, I started. I have notebooks where I've handwritten stories. I started typing, like a typewritten manuscript around age 9 or 10. And I still have that. So yes, by about age 9, I knew this is what I wanted to do, and I just got on that track, and I didn't stop writing ever since.
Great. That's a great place to end. I think we are running out of time, but just before you, okay, great. One last question is, what is your most favorite
Hi,
Amar Chitra
Rituparna.
Katha? Rituparna asks.
Oh, you're asking me to choose between. Oh man. Um, oh, they're all so great. Um, because there's so many individual titles, and then there's the Mahabharat as one
Yes.
epic thing. So, and that for fantasy readers is like, having
Yes.
individual titles is cool, but to have that series and you have that feeling that, man, I'm going to read all 50 of these, and you're at number one or two. I'm like, there's so much left to do. So yeah, I, the way I'm going to answer that question is I'll tell you the one that stayed in my mind from when I was a kid, the one that impacted me
That
most
works. Yeah.
was the story of Ganesha,
Okay.
because I have of Ganesh. I have that recollection of it's the first time I think that as a kid I encountered Shiva as a god. I didn't know anything about Hindu religion or mythology before, and to see Shiva come out, blue skin and everything, I was like, wow, what is this? You know, I was just in such awe of Shiva, this blue skinned god, and the story. I was just blown away. So I have that visual image of Shiva, and that's probably why when I wrote Warrior, a lot of Warrior is based on Shiva. It's really kind of a modern take on the Shiva myth and everything. So yeah, that's the one I'd pick of the lot. How
Okay,
dare you
great.
make me choose?
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And just before you leave,
Thank
can we
you.
expect series subsequent in the Oop and Leela series?
Well,
Are there more books in?
I do hope so. There are more
Okay.
stories. There are more
All right.
adventures. I have some in mind already, and we'll just have to see how things develop, really, because then
Okay.
that's a discussion that then we see with the publisher. We see how to
Yeah.
place things, and there's a calendar as well.
Yeah.
When do I write this, and when does it? So there's a
Correct.
lot of things in the way, but there is a
But there are
desire.
stories. Yeah.
Yes, I'll
Okay.
I'll pop
Great.
that wish candy for that.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
joining us and for being here on our last episode of this season. So, thank you so much. And this has been great. Thank you. And thank you to everybody who's watching. Um,
Thank you. All you guys stay safe and keep reading. Whatever it is, keep reading.
all right. Uh, All right, with this episode, we have come to the end of season one of ACK and Friends, and we've had 12 very delightful conversations. And I would like to thank all the authors who took time out to talk to us and join us. And thank you all for watching and for joining us every week. You can watch all the past episodes on our YouTube channel and on Facebook. And yeah, we promise to be back soon with a whole lot of new stories, new authors, and lots of fun. So, like always, have a great weekend.